And this is where I always say, like, I see 5 people jump in, and then it's like 20, and it just doubles really quick. So it's kind of one cool thing. Crystal was on a panel at KubeCon about, I don't know, 6 months ago with me, and for the first Chaos Day at KubeCon. So that was a lot of fun. So Crystal knows I tell some lame jokes sometime, but I'll try to be.
They're not lame.
But let's see where we're at. All right. Cool. So I'm just checking to see who's joining. Great. So I'm just going to get started just because I don't want to run out of time because y'all have a lot of great things to say. So my name is Matt Schillerstrom. I've been hosting this whole event with all my great coworkers, so hopefully you aren't tired of me yet. But I'm running good on caffeine. But the panelists here today, I have a great team, coworkers, friends that can answer a lot of questions. I have some pre-canned questions, but if you all want to go into Q&A and drop some questions in, I will navigate and facilitate that through. What we're trying to do here, like the journey of Chaos Engineering, as I've talked about too, like when I started in 2016, which isn't too long ago, but it was quite some time ago, I guess. Like it's very manual, right? And you had to go from team to team to team and prove it out and convince. But what I'm seeing at Chaos Carnival with all of my panelists here, right, and all the presentations, like everybody seems to like care about it now, and they seem like it's an approach that can make developers more productive and sleep better and just honestly like team camaraderie and collaborate. So these panelists have experience with all of that, hopefully some various opinions too, because it's always good just to have like, they say like great teams think alike, but when you think different, you can actually come up with a better solution too. So with that, I'm gonna popcorn over it to Crystal. Popcorn is a Target thing that I used to work at. I don't know if people do that, but you popcorn it over to Crystal. Crystal can give it a little introduction of herself, and then she can popcorn it to somebody else.
Yeah, sure. So, hey guys, hey everyone, I'm Crystal. I'm a lead software engineer at Dow Jones. I recently joined the community about a year ago. So, I've created a POC with my department, I don't know, like six to 8 months ago. And recently we were able to create our first Chaos game day, and we had some really great results. So yeah, and I've been working as a software engineer for 8-9 years now. But yeah, that's me. I'm gonna popcorn it over to Laurent.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Laurent Dombe. I'm the Chief Technologist for Federal Financial Services here at AWS. And for the last 2 years, I have been working with many customers around the world in regards to chaos engineering, various verticals as well. So not just financial services, but for example, media and entertainment or manufacturing. And we'll pass it on to Dushyant.
Hey, thank you, Karan. Hi, everyone. I'm Dushyant. I'm the practice entrepreneur at Nagarro, leading the resiliency engineering practice. And part of my role is to incubate the competency, evangelize the topic within the community in Nagarro. And some of the work that the team here at Nagarro has been doing has been very compelling. We've started this journey since 2019. And we have some very interesting use cases for doing both shift left in production. And it's been great collaborating with the Harness team as well on this. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Great.
Over to Saranya.
Yeah. So hi everybody. So this is Sarna, and I'm a senior software engineer at Harness, and I'm also a maintainer at Litmus Chaos. And like I'm most part of my work also like includes developing backend APIs, and I'm kind of also inclined towards developer advocacy too. So I love giving talks around open source community. Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Thanks all. And just to plug again, put some questions in the Q&A and I'll circle through that. I'll also make it interesting. If anybody wants to raise their hand and hop up on stage with us to answer a question, I'll allow that. You don't get any money or gift cards, but you get some fame. Maybe Preeti will take a screenshot and post it on Twitter perhaps, but we'll have fun with that. But first, I think Laurent was going to run a game day on Amazon.com with us, right? So I go first and do a shutdown experiment. Just kidding. I'm kidding. See, that was like a lame dad joke. But so here, the first question we're going to run through is Sariana, starting first. And again, there's a lot of people that's new in the audience with Chaos Engineering. There's a lot of mature. So as we think through these answers, our audience is, wide breadth. But what's the most common excuse like a team has given you to not start Chaos Engineering?
Oh, well, thanks for asking the question. I have actually a few excuses in my mind. So, like starting off with our system is already stable. Why do we even need it? So, like this excuse is mostly based upon the misconception that only the stable systems are, only the unstable systems need chaos engineering and not the stable ones. But like in reality, even the most stable ones also like get hugely benefited from chaos engineering, and we also get an opportunity to monitor the applications in such conditions. And secondly, like these kind of excuses mostly come with from the organizations or the smaller teams. Like we don't have time for chaos engineering, or like we are a small team, we don't require it right now. So like the organizations or the teams that are in initial phase, and they are more worried about developing the product rather than like thinking about making it resilient at the same time. So like even they are smaller team, but I think they can be hugely benefited. Like this makes being a small team makes them agile, and implementing chaos engineering becomes comparatively easier than the larger organizations. Like in beginning it can be like the learning curve might be a little steeper, there can be some like resource requirements, but not investing in them might lead to longer huge downtimes in long run. And one last excuse that we often get, like our system is way too complex for chaos engineering. So like there can be possible like few factors behind it, like fear of disruption, I would say. Like they are concerned about if the chaos experiment would like introduce instability to the system, and this can have a negative consequence to the team. But one important thing to note here is like chaos engineering is designed to be like carried out in a controlled and safe manner. And other reason might be like lack of resources, as I've mentioned. Like people the teams might not be aware of the tool sets that are currently present, or they might not be aware of the potential benefits that chaos engineering provides. So yeah, so these are a few excuses that I can think of.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm going to flip this question over to Crystal for a second, but more on a positive side. So what's been an experience for you where a team jumped in and you didn't even have to convince them?
There were a few teams that actually participated in the game day, and first off, they understood the value in investing in chaos engineering, because they have been woken up in the wee hours of the night because of an outage, or they had some downtime, or it's a customer facing product, and so we have users using it in APAC. So being woken up at 2 a.m. is not great. So we worked with some teams that own these critical services that were really happy to jump in to invest in chaos engineering and to jump in and participate for this chaos game day. But I did want to add that after talking to a lot of the teams, they weren't really, they didn't really give a lot of excuses. It was more of, they had more reservations whether this initiative would show them in a bad light if their service failed miserably after injecting the chaos failures. But after ensuring them that would not be the case and getting backing from upper management that this is more about identifying these issues and making sure that they don't happen in the future, and also to ensure that future services don't have any of these failures and are fault tolerant, then they're completely on board.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think answer, like I work with Sariana, and I think, one answer, I'm just going to put words in your mouth too, is if your leadership supports, like testing and learning from failure, and also just like trusts you, like you're a developer, what do you need to be successful? And then if you're like, I need to do this testing tool and stuff, like if your leadership supports that and encourages it, then, teams jump in. But Siriana, do you have any other teams that you worked with where they just jumped in, and you can share some like fun stories?
I mean, this generally happens during the release sessions. So we have this special forces group. So in any cases, any issues arise, we have this group, we tag each other and then we jump into a call, and then in a group we fix it. And yeah, that's the late night session sometimes. So these are kind of general stories that I can think of.
Yeah.
I did want to add that investing in chaos engineering is also more of an investment in a culture shift too, because I found that more of the case. Even if we had upper management or our SVPs backing us and understanding the value of proactively simulating failures in a controlled environment, there's still a culture shift with the developers because they're pretty resistant to learning something new, or a lot of the excuses that Sariana mentioned. But I think if you have a team of platform engineers and SMEs that really have the backing from upper management, for our instance, that's our team, and we're trailblazing this and trying to push this initiative and really work with a lot of the teams and collaborate with them and try to make it into an environment that it's an open discussion. Like, you were not being judged on your your work ethic or your code. It's more of a collaborative effort to make the entire platform and our products resilient. I think that's kind of what I've experienced at Dow Jones.
Yes, I think I can add to that, and I see pretty much very similar patterns with the customers that we're helping with. It's less a excuse not to start, but more a reservation how to start. There is a lot out there in regards to various frameworks for chaos engineering, and what they realize is it's not about the tool they use, but the process throughout shifting left that resilience basically culture. And so it's more about the enablement on how to start, how to think about the workload in regards to resilience, the experiments that they may want to use based on the hypothesis they create, and then the understanding of the outcome that they can show the value of the experiment to the business as well, what they were able to prove throughout.
Yeah. And Dushan, you work with a lot of various companies, so you get introduced to a team and you have to navigate the org chart and see how the culture is. So in essence, you're probably a really good, mind reader at this point. But
Yeah, so
what do you think?
just building on Lauren's point, that question around value often comes up, and Initially, now we talk a lot about chaos, but initially when this was not relatively a topic, which was very popular, you had to deal with the mindset of, why fix something which is not broken? And it always comes across as a NFR type of a requirement, and product teams always want to prioritize feature development and don't want to use developer time on some of these things which they cannot appreciate at a certain stage. So that is one common thing that I wouldn't call it an excuse, but it was a mindset that was resistive to adopt something like this. And that has been quite a case with many of the early conversations that we've had with various customers.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to add anything on that, on what we've learned through that question? No? Yeah, it's definitely a journey. I mean, even I, working with SRE teams or developers, it's challenging, but you do have to start somewhere. And I found most success when you have like leadership support, for sure. And if you bring in an outside service provider to help too, that's always nice, because they always can kind of just bring in that authoritative recommendation from what they've seen in the industry. So it's great, to have this evidence that people can take home with them today too. Let's move on to this next question. So we'll start with Crystal on this one. So can you tell me about chaos engineering without using the words chaos engineering? Like, just imagine you had to convince us about this, right? But just don't use the words chaos engineering. Like, well,
I'll try. I would say this is a concept where you run experiments on a system or application to have a bad day on purpose in order to build confidence and resiliency on how they perform when they're faced with unpredictable failures. And but with injecting failures with these chaos experiments, I believe the absolute key is to be able to transparently monitor what is actually happening with your application when you're running these tests. And having the responsible parties understand and have a strong telemetry foundation. I think that's really important, especially when they're provided with base telemetry tools. So like tools where they can see their metrics, or tools where they can look at all of their traces, tools where they can see all of their application logs. So for us, we utilize Prometheus metrics. We have all of the metrics then bucketed and stored in Thanos, and then we have Grafana dashboards that points to these buckets, so we can see everything all in one place. So once these responsible teams have access to these base telemetry tools, then you can prove or disprove your hypothesis after looking at your chaos results, and then eventually identify the faults and hopefully resolve them, so then you can rerun the test and then pass them.
Yeah, no, that's great though. I mean, like, so many conversations when I've started with chaos engineering, some teams are just like, no, and then you have to convince them. But yeah, I don't, Dushyant, what about you? How would you talk about chaos engineering without using chaos engineering?
So some of the ways that we've been trying, I'll just try to speak a few of them. One of them is it's a proactive testing methodology that allows you to find faults before they become outages. That's something that we use pretty often in a lot of our conversations. Something that I picked up recently is making your system digitally immune to unexpected events. That is another testing methodology. And the third one is slightly longish, but I'll still say it is what I again like to do. It's more of a simulation, of what if simulation, like the what if of Excel. so people relate to that as well. So the what if testing of your system's readiness to consistently deliver, a user experience at scale. I think those would be my three responses to something like that. I didn't use the word chaos, by the way.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Laurent, how about you?
So for me, it's all about resilience, and that really from start to finish, it's at the end of the day a journey, right? Either if we inject fault load or latency, all of this should be practiced as a continuous cycle, and it's not just a one-time effort. And so we need to understand that the success of an experiment is not just defined by the fault that we inject, but about the entire process that we apply, from discovering the workloads, all the mental models that we align, as well as the hypothesis that we define, right, about the understanding of the workloads, and then moving to the experiment and verify our mental models and see if it proves us right or wrong about the resilience of a specific workload that we have. And key there is that we repeat that again in a continuous cycle. And from a business outcome perspective, and I think this is key to all this, if we execute this right, then this continuous process, one, can shift the culture of resilience left, where it becomes ingrained in every team's daily routine, and eventually it will increase the operational excellence, the observability, as Crystal mentioned, and also the way on how we think about recovery-oriented architecture for our organizations and workloads.
Yeah, beautiful, for sure. So now, Sariana, you are an engineer. You live and breathe chaos experimentation. But what outcomes, like, what do you see big picture that you get out of the value of doing chaos engineering?
I mean, if the chaos testing is done in a proper controlled manner, the outcomes are can be pretty valuable. It generally sometimes it happens, like the negative case I would take, like engineers do not are a bit hesitant as Crystal already mentioned, because we are a bit resistant to the change, but uh, at the end of the day we need to accept the truth that chaos is good for us, and we need to accept it, and find out what are the important, the valuable insights we get, and then we take it as a learning and add it in our daily development cycle.
Yeah, that's great. The daily development cycle is key. I like how you called that out, for sure.
I wanted to, maybe this is kind of like a fun experience story, but when I first started my journey with Chaos Engineering, I thought it would be great to just run so many experiments across many different environments, because I was new to Chaos Engineering, and I soon realized that is not what you do, because then you can't really pinpoint what actually went wrong. And so obviously we scaled back, and then we started small with, say, one experiment, and then we we started testing, say, 3 applications or 3 services, and then you go from there. You kind of rinse and repeat. And I've also found from creating the Chaos Game Day that we recently held, the most important thing is accountability and also reporting, because I was trying to figure out how can we get teams.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry, that was my Siri. What was I saying? How can we get teams to be accountable for, say, their application failed this experiment, and how do we actually report this back up to upper management so they can see what are the outcomes and what is this actually valuable for for teams to invest in. But that was just my journey and what I experienced when I started with Chaos Engineering. But that was just a funny experience that I had in the beginning.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have been there where you think you need to do everything, but definitely can start small or slow. One thing it'd be great to get from each of you. So if you think about one finding from running a chaos experiment, or whether it was a game day, what do you typically, uncover? And then how does that engineer or that team perceive that? Crystal, you were kind of talking about they don't want to be at fault, right? But if you think, Crystal, what's one thing that you found with a team, and then how do they perceive it? How do they feel about it?
So one of the findings that we kept seeing over and over was a lot of our teams, microservices, their pods weren't scaling properly. So one way we kind of help them understand is that you need to configure and create an HPA, and based off of, say, a resource metric, or even better, a custom metric that is specific to their application or service, then that way it can scale. Say they have a lot of load and what have you. And so after we had open discussions with them and kind of showed them the results and basically had a retrospective, they also had a mutual understanding that they're not at fault and they're all about learning. And so it was a very positive experience. There were some teams where they were, I guess, how do I say, they were like, oh, well, there's no documentation, we didn't know. But that's okay, right? It's all about a learning process and the journey, and we're doing it together. Because also when we run these game days, we provide the teams these tools, but we also have identified, oh, okay, well, teams X, Y, and Z are running Prometheus queries, and oops, our Prometheus server couldn't scale, or it went down and these queries were taking forever. So it's a learning experience on both sides. And I think if you have that mutual understanding, then there's definitely positive outcomes.
Yeah. Dushyant, people are coming to you and your company probably already in pain, like they're what's one thing that you found, and then how did the team perceive it?
So there are both sides of the story always. So like Crystal just explained, there is always a learning experience. So there will be always a group of people who are more receptive to the findings and they would like to work on it, improve upon the experience and things like that. But then there is always this group of engineers that you may run into, which will always have the by design type of a response, to whatever findings that you're having. So, we did some tests with one cloud service provider, for example, and we learned that the redundant load balancers did not recover within a time span which is acceptable from a user experience perspective. And there was a lot of things that had to be done from the product team side, to build some graceful degradation strategy. But the response that came out was, yes, we know this and it's by design and we're not going to do anything about it. Then there could be more scenarios like this where which we have uncovered in several of our test scenarios. But it sometimes becomes a tough sell to engineering because they need to prioritize some of the other things at times. So I would say there is always two sides of the story.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna move. This is great. We could probably talk about learnings and failures for a while, but the next question I want to move into. And I'm going to try and relate this to serverless too, because somebody was asking about serverless. So, but Laurent, so we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I asked you to come to the panel. But if we had to rename chaos engineering, what would we call it? And it's not that we have to rename it, but this terminology is getting interesting. And in the audience here, they asked about, what is serverless chaos testing? And I almost feel like I'm like sorry that they have to ask that question, because I just want you to know, like, you can do chaos engineering or resiliency tests or whatever on any platform, But yeah, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so when we're thinking about chaos engineering, while the name is catchy, it's still challenging for some organizations today, and it stops them from adopting it because they still think, oh, this is this chaotic, scary thing that we're going to do in production. And so I think when we're looking at it, and Dishant kind of mentioned that in the previous question, it's more about fault load experimenting / testing, right? It's probably more accurate in the description of it, whether we're experimenting or testing against a very specific workload and add load or faults and inject these into the environment, or we're doing this randomly when we're more mature. I think important there, and when we're looking at the entire industry today and the terminology that we're using, there is a lot of mix, right, in various aspects there. Are we talking about an experiment, or is it a fault? Are we looking at unknowns or unknown unknowns, or is it the three unknowns, right? Or just recently in one of the sessions, we were talking about mean time between incidents, but many of us talk about mean time between failure, which is pretty much exactly the same thing. And so this makes it complex, I think, for our customers as a whole, for the industry that wants to adopt it, because they hear different things from different people and are not sure what is it exactly that we need to do. And I think we need to find common ground here as a whole, so that we can move on the same way as when you're thinking about open source community like Kubernetes, right? We started a long time ago. It was the community that came up, okay, this is the standard, this is what we're going to call it, and then we all ran with it.
Yeah, no, it's close to my heart what you're saying. But Sariana, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
So I think there was a lag here. So, like, I totally agree with Laurent that he said like it kinds of scare people. The terminology itself, the chaos, it's a bit chaotic. So, one other alternative that I would like to name it as like resilience engineering, maybe, which is like the name itself suggests the goal that we are trying to achieve as a team, like improving the reliability, the resilience of the system. So that one name that I can suggest.
Yeah, well, that's great. Karthik was talking earlier about the CNCF having a working group for chaos. That seems could be a definite approach to like at a working group with the CNCF, to talk through naming and terminologies and everything. Open floor. Does anybody have recommendations on how to bring the community and industry together to make this more accessible, just so we aren't confusing like new people joining today thinking it's some huge daunting task to implement, but in reality, it's something they can just use when they're developing.
I think it will make a whole lot of sense when we're thinking about how to start, how to onboard, right? Because there is still a lot of misconception in regards to, oh, I need all this maturity to start, and it isn't the case. So, and I think it's important that as the community, again, we're helping customers with, this is the approach, and there is not much you need to get started with chaos engineering and start iterating at the end of the day, so that they can scale it across their organizations. And so as a working group, I think would make a lot of sense, because again, what I think we all realize over the last 2 years is that there is a lot of demand around chaos engineering as a whole, not just across one industry, but many industries. And we see Crystal, as well on the financial services side. And when you're thinking about, right, the traditional aspects of financial services, but we're talking about chaos engineering, that's a big deal, right? And I think from that and from the learnings that we have across all industries as a consortium or something like that, to enable all customers around the world, that would make a lot of sense.
I kind of wanted to add, for my journey at least, because when I got presented this topic of investing in chaos engineering and wanting to propose this to our upper management, I thought it was a very daunting task, to be very honest with you all. But I think once you start doing research and peeling back the layers of the onion and really understanding your platform and your infrastructure, then you start looking at the different tools and the frameworks that's out there that are incubating projects like Litmus. And for example, Litmus is very pluggable and flexible. So then you figure out ways how you can plug it into your existing platform and your infrastructure. For us, it was our service mesh platform. And then you kind of realize and you start small, because I was able to create a proof of concept with, say, one test application, and then there's predefined experiments, and there's just so much documentation that a lot of our community has created, and there are some best practices out there as well. And then you kind of start there, and then once you are able to complete the proof of concept, you start scaling out and then presenting it to your team and your upper management, and you go from there. But I think, having a larger community and adopters that actually have successfully integrated this into their software lifecycle, that's really helpful. You're muted.
I did that again. All right, thanks. Do you see chaos testing as a tool for self-disruption? It's kind of an interesting question. Do you want to answer that?
I'm going to punt it over so I can think about it.
So the question is self-disruption or self-destruction?
Yeah.
This
is an open-ended question. Answer it how you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are a few things that we need to think about. One is we need to move away from looking at it as a mechanism that creates disruption, right? Because the goal is not to create a disruption. The goal is to understand what causes the disruption. And so when we're going through the life cycle and we inject faults, and that is key. If we know that fault will create a disruption, we're not running the fault. We know that it's going to create that disruption. We're going to fix that issue first, and then we're going to validate again, right? If we fixed that fault. And so, to Crystal's point, and I think that's very important, especially when we're starting out in that domain of chaos engineering, you have this catalog of faults that you can inject, but you don't know what should you inject. And so we need to help the customers and the community to understand. Let's say I want to try out, well, is my circuit breaker working? And I'm gonna, or am I gonna hit all these circular dependencies that are gonna kick off because I don't have my circuit breaker implemented the right way? That we're injecting a fault latency, or we're bringing systems down because we don't know, right? But if we would know, we're not going to cause that disruption. So I think that's the key here, is that it's very controlled on what we want to inject, and not just randomly something that will impact our customers.
Yeah, brilliant. And this leads into like one of the last questions here too. But like, how do we make this practice more urgent, right? And more just aware? And, I got to work during some security breaches that impacted retail organizations back in the day. And security was, that's super urgent, right? Like all hands on deck. But with the reliability, you have an incident and then you fix it, and then people kind of forget about it sometime, except the people that care. But like Dushan, if you look at all of your experience and working, like where do you see like these organizations, like where is it best for implementing like with the urgency? Like what do you see winning?
So one of the things that I've always which I'm seeing consistently work is how we can sell that business story really well. In one of my most earlier conversations, I remember there was a product owner who was emphasizing the need of generating one-time password to be successful, almost 100% of the times. And the reason the person gave was that there is a SME segment that depends so much on just that one-time password to generate, a sales transaction code. If that lead goes away, that person may lose business for the rest of the month. So just emphasizing the impact that your customers may have, that's a great story selling approach, which I have seen that consistently works. And this is a pattern that I see, with one of the payment solutions that we're working. They are ruthless in terms of ensuring customer experience, giving it the utmost priority, and they take each incident very seriously. And when that kind of story selling is kind of agreed upon, pretty much everyone falls in line. So that really creates the urgency in my mind. I guess if that is not creating the urgency, the other approaches could be, if you are a SaaS product company, perhaps the SLA compliance is something which is pretty critical. There are certain commitments and promises that you make to the customers, and there are chargebacks if you don't meet them in terms of your targets, right? So that's another way to build the urgency. Or you know the third one I see is more to do with it's an imperative. You just need to do that because there is only one way of growing your business. You just say, for example, you're a financial services company and you got this prestigious contract from the government within your country that only you are authorized to perform this transaction. Now there is suddenly a change in business, and you need to support scale, and you need to enable channels to run your business. And in that case, there is no way out. You have to do this. So those three, I think, again, selling the business story is the key. The security incident that you mentioned, I think of that more as a fear-based approach, of losing your brand image. That also works, certainly, but I would like to stick to the more positive outcomes.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna put this question on stage here as we end the session here at the top of the hour and move to some more great discussions. But if each of you could just answer this question, if you're good, just briefly, how would you talk to Kumar here about the ballpark in time? Everybody's bought off on it; they're investing. What would you say?
So I think, am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it depends upon where do we incorporate chaos engineering, like in which stage. For me, if we are incorporating chaos engineering during the development cycle, like the continuous resilience that is currently in trend, that would help us resolving issues or any potential threats during the development cycle, and it might make it faster, the whole procedure, the complete adoption. And I think around 3 to 5 months. I do not want to give the numbers, but yeah, that's my estimate.
All right. Crystal, how about you? What would you say?
Yeah, I also don't really want to give like a set amount of time, but I would say about 6 months for us. We didn't invest in shift left testing, so our chaos testing was done after the applications were deployed in pre-prod or production. So our workflow was a little bit different. Honestly, I think it really depends on where you inject this into your software lifecycle. Also, if you even have a team to really trailblaze and dedicate to get this working for your company or your department. There are all a lot of variables, but I would say if you start small, about 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know if I like giving a number either. Dushan,
Yeah.
Ron, do you have an opinion there?
Yeah, that's again, it's a very subjective thing, and it really depends on how do you want to consider ROI. Yeah, so if I just look at it, showing value can be possible, even in a 2 to 3 week time window. When you just get in, do a discovery, and the very fact that most of the times you will see that customers don't even have enough documentation to identify the critical services, what are the dependencies, and the moment you are able to produce that documentation for them, that is immense value. They can immediately start consuming that documentation to onboard new engineers, reduce dependencies for people chaos. So the time to value is very different in different for each person. So I would like to say that it's relatively faster. I wouldn't settle for a 6-month window for sure.
Yeah, I think, as everyone said, there are a lot of variables there. When you're thinking about if you're starting with a customer and let's say you do a game day, right? They get instant value out of that game day. I think there's a difference between looking at it holistically and scaling it across a company like Crystal, you're doing with Dow Jones, and you have all these teams that you need to enable. That takes time because there are just processes in large organizations to go through it. And so that takes time. In smaller organizations, you can iterate much faster from that perspective. And additionally to that, I think we shouldn't forget the maturity level of where the customer is in regards to understanding resilience,
Yeah.
right? Or security and resilience, depending on what they're doing chaos engineering on, because that will also define how fast you can move. Because again, it's not just about the fault I inject, but how did I build my workload to understand it is resilient, and what faults I need to inject to move forward and show basically ROI on what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to add, like for us at least, there was a lot of pre-work in terms of making sure that our teams are mature with their observability tools and actually understanding what is resiliency and why is it important. Because without that pre-work, you can inject the fault and invest in chaos engineering all you want, but if you don't have the outcomes or even people understanding the value of it and doing the pre-work, then there's really not much to show, especially to upper management, which is kind of the end goal, especially when you work with bigger organizations. But I think the pre-work is really important.
Yeah.
And
Well, guys and gals, I'm gonna end right now. This is good. I apologize for running over, but this has been such a great discussion. There's a lot of questions that we didn't get through that I'm gonna post in Slack, and if you happen to go over there, you can answer them. The rest of the community can too. But what I'm hearing, from everybody is like, you can start slow, but don't be slow to start with Chaos Engineering. You can start today, and again, look at the ROI you can achieve just on running one experiment. So again, what I'm hearing is start today if you're not running. But there's 2 presentations after this. I'm going to hit end session, and if y'all can go find which one you want to attend. And thanks so much to the panel here. So if you can't hear everybody clapping, but
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
thanks.